Today's presentation is by Mary-Ellen Burl, and Mary is our new trainer in WesGrid. So she'll be doing a lot of webinars, and today is her first webinar on fun tools in the Linux command line. And I'm going to pass the microphone to Mary.
Good morning, everyone. So there were lots of registrants today, but not that many people are here. So maybe I should conclude that a lot of people would like to like the command line, but actually they don't. So if that's the case, I'll try to make you like it a little bit more. So I'll be indeed presenting some tools that I think are pretty fun, that can make your life on the command line a lot easier. So one tool that I really like is called FZF. It's a fuzzy finder, and you can find it on GitHub. So as you can see, it has a lot of stars. It's a very popular project. The last commit was 3 hours ago, so it's very actively maintained. It's also very well documented with lots of information, examples, a wiki. So let's have a look at what this FZF is about. So when you use the command line, a lot of outputs are extremely long. For instance, if I want to get the running processes on my machine and I type the command ps ef, I get something that is extremely long. And not only this is not exactly convenient, but sometimes you can't even scroll all the way back up to the command you were looking for. So it's really not user-friendly. If I show you in a shell what that really looks like, if I'm looking, for instance, for something that's called mic tray, which is my little microphone tray icon, well, it's really not all that convenient to find. So one way to go around that usually is to use less. So you pipe your command into less, and less outputs one screenful at a time. So that's a lot more convenient, and less has some functionality. For instance, you can search. So that's a lot nicer. But there are things that are even more convenient, and FZF is one of them. So instead of piping the command to less, we can pipe the command into FZF. So I still have my command, pipe FZF. And as with any command, of course, the best way to get information on the utility is to look at the man page. So that gives you all the options, all the various flags, and some examples. So we'll be going back to this man page several times to use FZF in a nicer and nicer way as we move along. So let's try a very first example, because one thing that's great about FZF is that it can be used in countless settings. You can use it with any command that outputs a list, basically. So there are very many situations that apply to it. So for instance, I have just used this command earlier today, and I would like to reuse it. So I would like to find it in my command line history. If I type history, I will get my entire shell history, and the command I am looking for is in there somewhere. But scrolling up this way is definitely not ideal. But if I pipe history into FZF, this is what I get. So history, pipe FZF. I have now all my history, and I can search on the fly. For instance, if I type shown for change owner, which is the command I was looking for, you can see that I am selecting only the inputs in my history that do match those characters. But there are still lots of things going on because shown is here, it's selected, but anything that has a C and a H and a W is selected, even if those aren't contiguous. So you can escape with a little quote in front, and this will only select characters that are next to each other. And if you don't want to have to escape all the time, you can add the E flag. E stands for exact, and so if I now add the E flag and I type shown, you can see that even without the little quote, I only select the lines in my history that have contiguous characters. But as you can see, by default, things are listed from from the lower value until the greater value. And for some things, that's totally suitable. But for the history, well, maybe that's not very convenient because maybe you'd like to have the latest command you've been using first instead of have it all the way at the very top. So to change this, the tax flag allows to reverse the order of FZF. So now I add tac, and now as you can see, my very last command was history pipe FZF E, and that's the one that comes at the bottom. But now you'll notice something a little interesting. If I still type my command, FZF by default also ordered things by length, which in some setting can be extremely convenient, but in this particular setting, in the context of the history, is not all that great because you can see that the first number here is the history index. They're all in chaotic order. They're ordered, they're sorted by length instead of by chronology. So that's not very suitable for this situation. So I can add the +S, which is the equivalent of no sort. And so now I still have the reverse order, starting with the latest entry in the history at the bottom. But if I start typing things, you can see that now it's things remain ordered by the index and not by length. And so I can see, OK, the latest time I used shown is here, and then this one is there, etc. So the command I was looking for was this one. Oh, and also you can navigate with the arrow keys or with Emacs keybindings like a Control-P and Control-N to move around. You can keep typing things. For instance, if I keep typing Marie and then Restic, I can narrow down to a closer and closer selection, but you can also move up and down until you find the one you like. So this is the line I was interested in. If I press Enter, the default behavior of FZF is to print the line in the output. So that's great, because now I could, you know, select it, copy it, paste it. But I can do even better. Why not? I could get rid of the beginning of the line, because there's a bunch of space, and then there is the index, the history index value, and then there are another bunch of spaces. Like, all these things are helpful to organize the history chronologically, but if you're interested in the command, you don't want all that stuff at the top. So I can just pipe some sed command in there. So sed allows to replace what is between the first and second forward slash by what is between the second and the third forward slash in this with this S sign here. So basically here, I want to replace this regular expression by this one. So I'm basically deleting this regular expression because I have nothing here. So the star means 0 or more character. So I will be looking for 0 or more spaces, followed by 0 or more digits. This thing symbolizes digits in regular expressions, followed again by 0 or more spaces. All of that, I will get rid of it. So let me run this. Oops. Oh, sorry. Let me try this again. Okay. I thought I could copy past this, but maybe I need to put it in a line. Okay. So I have now the history with the exact match in reverse order without sorting, and FZF will still print the selected line, but before printing it, it will be transformed by sed so that what precedes the command will be removed. So if I still look for my command, which is here, if you remember earlier on, it was printing this entire line, space, space, 32, etc. Now it only prints the command itself. It got rid of what came first. So that's nice, but we can even do better, because we could then send this command into the clipboard so that I could then just pass it wherever I want, including in my next prompt. So if I go back to the previous command and I pipe then the result to xclip, which is a utility that moves things to or from the clipboard, I can look for my command. And now when I will press enter, instead of printing the output, which is what FZF normally does, nothing will get printed, but it will be sent to the clipboard. So it looks like nothing happened, but in fact, it's in my clipboard. So now if I pass it, I have my command. So that's a bit of a nicer way than having to just type history and look for my command. And of course, you could create a little function with all of this. So I've just inserted the previous code in a function that I'm calling his for history. And if I run this, now I just have to call his, and I can use this function. And of course, if I don't remember what the various flags are, I just have to rerun man FZF, and the E flag for exact match that we've been using is here. The +S for no sort is here. The tag for the reverse order is here. And obviously, there are many more options that we haven't made use of in this case. Let's go over a second example. So I have two little icons here. This one is called mic tray for microphone tray, and this one is called passes tray for a Pulse Audio system tray. Let's say I'd like to kill those two processes. So I can start with the same, with the command that will list all of my running processes. That's the command I mentioned earlier. So okay, so these are all the running processes. It's really inconvenient to look for mic tray in there, obviously. I could pass that into less, and then I could look for tray. And okay, so you can see passes trays over there and mic trays over here. And so from this, I would have to remember their PID, their process ID, which is 795 and 796. And then I would have to get out of here and to kill those processes. So that totally works. But we can also do better. I can use so my list of processes piped into FZF, and if I type tray, as earlier, I am selecting everything that has a T and an R and an A. So okay, it would have been nicer to escape this. Now I'm only selecting contiguous tray, or as we saw earlier, I can use the E for exact flag, and then I don't have to escape. I can directly look for tray. Okay, but this time we don't want just to show the lines. We'd like to apply an action onto the two of them. So the flag M allows to select multiple entries. So because if I ran just this and I type tray, if I tab, nothing happens. But if I add the N flag, now I can move as always with the arrow keys or Control P, Control N, but with tab, I can select or unselect line. Like I'm selecting the first one, I'm unselecting it. So if I'm selecting both lines, any action will be applied onto both lines. So if I just run this, because the default action of FZF is to print the output, if I press enter, it will just print those two lines. What we're interested in those results, whoops, sorry, I went a little fast, I forgot to select. What we are interested in those results are those two numbers, which are the process IDs. The rest was useful to filter things, but now I want to get rid of it. I'm only interested in this. So I could use some regular expressions, as we did earlier, to get rid of everything, but a simpler way is to use awk. Awk print 2 will only print the second element, which is this. Like this is going to be the first one, the second, the third. I'm interested in the second element. So if I run this, and I select my tray, and I filter my trays, I select them both, and now if I press enter, I have printed only the PID. So we're getting closer. Now from these PIDs, what we want to do to them is to terminate the processes. So the utility kill sends signal to processes, and by default, kill sends the flag 15, which is a seek term, which is a way to terminate running processes, and that's ideally the first thing to try, because it's a clean way to terminate processes. It allows garbage to be collected, and it's the smoothest way to kill things. So we will pipe our process IDs as arguments of kill. If we were piping them directly into kill, that wouldn't work because they are arguments. Well, because kill, the way kill is designed, it needs arguments to be entered in a certain way, but the exargs utility allows us to go around this. So if I add exargs kill, now I'm back into SZF, I select my tray. Now, so look here, I have those two utilities running. You can see them. Now, this time, I'm not just going to print them by pressing Enter. I'm going to actually terminate them. So boom, they're gone. It worked. If things don't work with SyncTerm, and if you want to really kill some processes, you could use SyncKill, which has the which is the flag 9. So by default, the flag was 15, so we could have added flag 15, but it was unnecessary. 9 has to be added, and you can add it this way. So I will relaunch my. Okay, my microphone is back in there. My whoops, wrong one. My that's tray. Okay, so now you can see my two processes are back in there. And if I run the same thing, but this time I am adding the 9 flag to the command kill, which in this case is unnecessary, but just for purpose sake, because I don't want to kill processes that I might actually be needing. I'm just killing things that I don't mind not having. So back in SZF, I select my tray, and this also kills them. And then you could create, as we saw previously, a function with this. And if you do so, and you put this in your bash RC file, you can even get more fancy by making sure that the process isn't a root process, and by inserting a number of checks. You can make things as sophisticated as you want. But the purpose here was really to show that SZF is just a nice way to, and let me relaunch my little processes, a nice way to filter, select, or apply action to any list, any output. So you could use it very conveniently with grep, with find, with git. Actually, let's go over a very last example. We won't go over all the nitty-gritty of the function, but it's just to show you a little bit more of the power of SZF. Let's say I would like to look for a specific commit and copy the hash of that commit send it to the clipboard.
So Dave is going to try to get moving on Dahlgren, right? So he's going to try to, I think he's out this week, but hopefully, I don't know, maybe next week we can reach out.
Okay. So don't worry about all those details. This is not the point here, but I'm just showing you the code so that you have an idea what's in there, but I just want to demo what it will do. So I am defining an alias, which is git log with some fancy coloring. Git log is a way to show previous commits, and git log accepts countless arguments, so you can color it in ways. And then I'm defining some variables about the hash of concern, the line of concern, and then this is the function in which I am using this alias and those variables. But what matters is that I am piping something into FZF with all sorts of flags. So FZF can get very fancy if you want. And one of them, which is absolutely cool, is the preview flag. So this function is called gcop for git commit preview. That's how I called it. So if I ran gcop, this is what I have. So, and yes, something that I didn't mention is that as part of the customization, you can have FZF show from the top or from the bottom. So in previous examples, we had it from the bottom. This is from the top. It's highly customizable. So this is ordered chronologically with the most recent commit at the top. So I can scroll down with the arrow keys. And what's really cool is that I get a preview of the line I'm in. And this is all command line stuff. This is not a GUI. You could do that across SSH, no problem. It's a pure command line coolness thing. And of course, I can also filter. So let's say I'm looking for a commit for my Emacs custom file. So if I type .emacs, I'm filtering with Emacs. And maybe it was something that had to do with Ranger. So I'm filtering with Ranger. And then I think it might be this one, or maybe it's this one. I'm not sure. As part of the customization, I defined some bindings, 2 bindings. Enter would do this, and out Y would do that. So you can even define actions with custom binding, and they will show here. So enter is to enter the preview, because this only shows you the head, but if you want to see more, OK, now I'm in it, and it's in a less style thing. Well, this is not a very great example because it was a short commit. Let's try, yes, this is a longer one, so you can see that you can move in this as like a classic less, less, really. To get out of here, I can type Q. That gets me back here. So after I've explored it, if I've decided, yes, OK, this is the commit I was looking for, this is what I wanted, OK. Now, my will copy the git hash, which is here. So if I press my, I've copied the hash. So now if I exit, and if I pass what's in my clipboard, I have the hash that of that commit. So the applications are endless. And so you can find many examples such as this on the FZF GitHub project page and on the wiki, but you can also make your own. And you can use it very simply without flourish by just typing FZF after grep on the command line, or you can create very fancy functions with all sorts of fancy configurations, and then have this in your bash configuration and have those functions ready to use. Another tool that I really like is autojump. So it also is on GitHub. It also has a lot of stars. It is not under super active development, as you can see. Things have slowed down a bit, but so far it still doesn't have bugs that are a big issue, and I think it's pretty great. So what it does is that each time you visit a path from the command line, it will store that path and give it an index based on how frequently you have gotten there. And then the shortcut for autojump is G for jump. And then you just type some key element of that path, and it will get you to the best bet. So when you start using it, at first it doesn't work perfectly because you need to build a little bit of history. And one thing to be aware of is that it will never get you to a place you have not CD'd to. So if you just install it and you type G home, for instance, nothing will ever happen because you first have to go to home at least once until that works. But once you have a history, it's pretty magical. For instance, this my little presentation is in a directory that has slide in it. So if I type G slide, it takes me directly to this path without having to remember where it is and without having to type it. And it doesn't have to be like I was in home and now I'm somewhere within home, but it doesn't have to be. You can jump outside of where you are. For instance, if I want to jump in media, like media in the Linux architecture is /media. If I just type med, it gets me there. And I can go to, I don't know, my download directory is called DL. So if I just type GDL, it gets me to my download directory. If you want to purge the history, because sometimes you've accumulated all this history, but then you have renamed things or deleted paths, you run G, sorry, I couldn't remember because I have aliases for everything. It's G purge. And OK, I had 14 entries that were not valid anymore. So they get deleted. And with GI for increase or GD for decrease, you can decrease the ranking of a place. So for instance, if when you type G med, instead of taking you to media as you would like, it takes you to medical because you have another place that's called medical. You could go to your medical repository and decrease with G minus D and some value the score for that repository. Or you could go to G med and increase it. So you can fiddle with it a little bit if you wanted, but out of the box without fidgeting with anything, as soon as you build up a little bit of history, it works perfectly. So I really use it for everything all the time because it's just so convenient. Then another tool is Ranger. So Ranger is a file manager that works entirely in the command line. And that really has all the coolness and little perks of GUI systems, even though it's a command line thing. So you can use it on SSH or other things as well. It's written in Python. And this is what it looks like. So I have a shortcut for it that's R, but typically you would call Ranger. But I will launch mine with R. So this is what it looks like. It's utterly customizable, but by default, it has 3 levels of architecture. This is the place where we are, as you can see in the path. This is like there are 18 elements into this directory, and you can preview them here. That right panel is the preview, and this is the parent element. And there are Vim type shortcuts by, key bindings by default, but you can customize everything. So you can move up the architecture, you can move down. You can send shell commands. You can send things directly to the console. And so, for instance, since we've just talked about autojump, you could totally integrate autojump into Ranger so that instead of navigating with all the ups and downs, you can call the autojump command. So for instance, if I want to go to my slide directory as we did earlier, I will get directly into slide. It's set so that I'm automatically entering the directory of choice, but that again is customizable. You could customize it so that you would land here but not enter it instead of entering it. Let's go back over the media example. Up, now I'm into media. You can access, of course, the history easily, so I can go back to slide. One thing that is pretty cool is that the preview can show not only the content of directories, but also the content of files. For instance, if I enter this directory here, now I have this markdown file, I can see the preview. So this file doesn't have that much, but this one shows, and as you can notice, there is syntax highlighting into the preview. So it's looking pretty fancy, pretty cool, and you can even have preview of PDFs and images. So if I go to my download folder where I have all sorts of stuff, yeah, for instance, here I have some paper downloaded with some terrible auto-generated name from the internet. I have a PDF preview. Because I'm not opening the file here. This is only a preview. And same here. You can view some syntax highlighting in an R file, more R files. And OK, let's see. OK, well, like some pictures, you can see some previews. I'm glad it's nothing too crazy embarrassing that came up. So there we go. To customize this tool, there are a number of files to be aware of. So you can customize things for the entire system, but it's far from ideal because when you will update Ranger, your things will get overwritten. The thing to do is to copy the default configuration files into your home directory, and the project has a lot of instructions. They have a wiki. There's a lot of information on where to find the files, how to copy them, how to customize them. But once you have copied them, you can edit only the commands that you would like to change, so you don't have to have everything. So there are a number of settings, and the key bindings. If you like Vim key bindings, that's great. If you don't, you can just customize them to whatever you want. So for instance, okay. So by default, there is a key bind. Looks like there is a question. Yes, you could use Emacs key binding in Ranger. I use Emacs absolutely everywhere all the time, though not necessarily Emacs key bindings everywhere. But yes, you can set anything you want. So I don't know if you could use multiple. Yeah, actually, no, you can use a series of key bindings. So yes, you could set up even lengthy, complex Emacs key bindings where you have to press Control-C, Control-E, Control something else. That would absolutely work, yes. You would just add all these control whatever one after the other after the keyword map and then your command. So absolutely. So for instance, by default, the way my things is set, if I press a certain key, that will open the file in the same window. But if I press some other key, I can open it somewhere else. So all this is set in this. And because we also went over FZF, you can even use FZF within Ranger for a number of things. So for instance, if I go back to my download directory, which has a lot of stuff, if I'm looking for something, I have a little command written in Python that uses FZF that I have bound to a key bindings in my rc.conf file, and I can use it. So now you recognize the typical FZF interface, if that's the right word. And the way I set it, I even have a little preview, so I can look for, I don't know, for instance, some R script. So that's going to filter R scripts, and as I select them, I can have a little preview. And if I press Enter, it's going to take me to that file. So doing this again. Now let's say, I wanted one that had random forest in it. OK, oh, there it is. Yes, the preview looked good. That's what I was interested in. Enter, boom. I am on random forest. And you could, of course, bind this in countless ways. The file in which you customize these commands is called rangercommands.py. So as you can see, it's a Python file. And the command that I just showed is here. So it's a Python function that has FZF in it. And I have a number of them, as you can see, with some that are recursive, some that are non-recursive, because depending on the situation, maybe I just want to look at the first level. Maybe I want to look at the entire tree, etc., etc. So another file that I'd like to show you is called rifle.conf. Ranger has its own little program, which is pretty great to show this preview. It's called Rifle. And you can also customize it so that you can set what utility will be used for the preview for what type of no, sorry, actually, sorry, I'm telling you something totally wrong. Rifle is not for the preview. Rifle is for the utility that is being used when you open a file from Ranger. It's the equivalent of Mimeo or XDG Open, etc. So, for instance, if I open this file, which is a .r, in my system, it's going to open it in Emacs. This is Emacs. If I, let's see, a PDF, well, yeah, if I open this PDF, it's opening it in Zathura, because Zathura is the one that I set by default. I have several PDF readers in my system, so the reason it chose Zathura is because it is set in here. If I go to PDF, Right. So if the extension is PDF and if Zatura is installed, well, then that's what is used. And it's highly customizable, and I like it way more than Mimeo and all the XGG opens that are normally used to set default applications. The previews, because I told you that was a preview and I was wrong. The preview is set somewhere else, and I don't remember what it is called. Render preview script. Ah, okay, yes. The preview is actually a shell script that's called scope.sh, and that's where you set which utility is used to render the preview of which type of file. So, for instance, do I have any markdown in here? No, I don't. Where was I? That right. Yes. If you remember, here, the rendering for Markdown is nice because it cleans all the markup elements, and this is done with Pendoc. So, oh, and actually, yeah, this is not in the default Ranger scope.sh. That's something that I submitted a pull request for this, but it hasn't been integrated yet. So this is only something I have locally. But any Office documents like ODT, doc, and the likes did not have any preview, so I added a number of little utilities such as catdoc and pendoc and etc. so that these type of files, which aren't text files, can still be previewed. I don't have many of them because I try to stay away from that type of format, but maybe I can find one to show you. Oops, sorry. Yes, okay. So I have here a docx, which is the Microsoft Word extension. I have a document here, and it is rendered for docx. It is rendered with pendoc. So what you can see here is the result of this command, which renders doc files in Markdown, because that's the only way to have it nicely preview without having a bunch of gibberish in here. So that's about that. Oh yes, actually the very last thing until I'm done is for people who, like me, have absolutely no memory, because I told you there are all these key bindings that are set by default, and if you use Vim, most of them will be rather intuitive, but maybe not all of them. And if you customize them, the ones you don't use all the time, you might forget them. So having to open the rcconf and look for the command and be like, oh, how do I do that again? That's rather tedious. So because I love custom key bindings and because I have absolutely zero memory, what I do is that I have all sorts of little aliases that use FZF and on all of my files that have custom key bindings. So whether it's Ranger, Emacs, or whatever. So I am using the file that has the key bindings in the case of Ranger, it's the rcconf file. I am gripping the relevant lines. In this particular file, it's any line that starts with map, because map is the way to set key bindings for Ranger. And then I'm piping that into FZF with a few little flags. And I have an alias. K is for key, and R is for Ranger. I have KE for Emacs, etc. And so if I ran KR, and let's say I didn't remember how to use something using sudo, I type sudo, oh, right, okay. It's exclamation mark SD allows me to open directories with sudo, and exclamation mark SF allows me to open files with sudo. So that's yet another little example of how FZF can just be used with everything. So I'm pretty much done. The only little criticism that some people might have with Ranger is that because it is written in Python, it is a little on the slow side. So for my personal use, that's absolutely fine. I never find it too slow, but depending on what you're doing, if you have directories with thousands of files, or if you use SSH, or like there might be situations in which you might find it a little laggy. So there are alternatives. NNN is the fastest of them all because it's written in C. It's very similar. Oh yeah, that's right. Yes, you have various. I never use it, so I don't remember, and I got surprised by the design, actually. I thought it would look like something else. You have various tabs in here, and you can navigate things. So the key bindings are different. I don't know them. But the idea is similar. It doesn't have the preview. It doesn't have, it's not as customizable. It's not as nice and friendly. So that's why I use Ranger instead. But if you're all into speed and efficiency, that might actually be the right tool for you. There is an alternative written in Go. It's called LF. And then there's one written in Bash, which is the, well, very fast file manager. And then I don't have time here to show you more tools, but here is a little list of utilities that I use often and that, if you're curious, you can explore on your own. There's TIG, which is a way to perform all your Git actions in. It's an uncursive interface, so it looks kind of GUI while still being in the command line. So, for instance, if I run TIG from my home directories, I can see all my commits. I can see my my untracked file, my modified files. I can so it's, I don't use it all that often because what I showed you with FZF earlier is kind of an alternative, which I like better. But this is a nice interface to Git that runs fully in the command line, and that also you can use from Ranger. If I'm in Ranger and I want to use it, I have little bindings that launches TIG directly as well. RG for rip grep is an alternative to grep. And AG is a similar tool. They're both extremely fast, extremely convenient. FD is an alternative to find. It doesn't have find's very awkward syntax. The syntax is much more intuitive, and it is extremely fast. And then fast is similar to autojump, but it also allows you to jump to files, not just to directory. The only little downside is that it hasn't been developed in quite a few years. So I still use it, but if nobody goes back onto maintaining it, at some point it might become a little buggy. So that's that. So if you have any questions, I will be very happy to try to answer them. Oh, there is a question. Okay, so it's not a question, but someone made a comment that they are on a Mac, and they are saying that they were allowed to install FZF with brew install FZF, brew install autojump, and brew install Ranger. So for Mac users, you might be happy to hear that. And also on the Mac, you can replace xclip, which is, remember, that little utility that allows to send something into the clipboard with pbcopy. And so it makes some of the FZF example work with the OS X clipboard. Yes, because that's something that I should have mentioned. I am on Linux, and so these things might not all work exactly as I presented them if you are on Windows or on a Mac. Oh, Mimeo, right. So the utility that I mentioned that sets the default utilities for don't know if it's on GitHub, I don't remember. Yes, it is. XDG Open is the default utility in Linux to set no, that's not that, actually. To set the default applications, but the one I use, but I'm honestly not satisfied with either of them. Okay, so this is Mimeo. So you can set what default applications will open what type of files. And it is more customizable than XGG Open. It's a little better, but I'm still not always happy with it. I find that the rifle utility that comes with Ranger really does the best job. And what is Emacs and the Emacs key bindings mentioned before? Sorry, can you elaborate this question a little bit? Something about Emacs key bindings? I'm not sure I understand the question. So, Unel Garcilaso, if you could either unmute your mic and just ask the question directly, or if you could type more info.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, hi, thank you so much. Thanks for your talk. So someone asked at first, can you use Emacs key bindings in Ranger?
Yeah, and when you can, yeah.
Emacs are, and what are the key bindings that this person was asking about?
Oh, I think they were just asking any Emacs key bindings, because Emacs has all sorts of key bindings, and people who use Emacs all the time like to have Emacs key bindings everywhere, and so you could totally set them in Ranger. For instance, Ranger by default has Vim key bindings. So in Vim, to go up and down, the bindings are J and K. So by default, and those I haven't changed, by using J and K, you can move up and down. But you can set them to the equivalent Emacs key binding would be Control P to go up. Oops. Well, but that, for me, they're bound to something else. They go to my history. But you could bind going up and down to Control P and Control N, so that if that's what you're used to, instead of having to use J and K, which is the Vim style thing, you could use Control P, Control N.
Okay, so key bindings are basically a way to navigate through the panel, right?
Oh yeah, key bindings, they're just shortcuts. Key bindings are like any shortcuts. Like, are you a Windows user?
I'm a Windows user, but I started recently with Linux too.
Okay. But like, for instance, Control C, Control X, Control V to copy, cut, and paste in Windows, those are key bindings. In Vim or in Emacs, you wouldn't use Control C, Control V, or Control X. You would use different bindings, and that's what you can customize in this file.
Okay, thank you. And about Emacs, so Emacs seems to be like a special kind of editor, if I am right?
It is a text editor, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? For those who are shy, Alex, is there a way to post questions later on? And I forgot to show where to find the talk. If you go to the main
training materials website.
Training material website, which is very slowly opening. Sorry for the slow connection.
Usually the browser is very slow when you're running video for some reason.
Ah, that's what it is. I was blaming SFU, but okay. So if you go to the main training materials website, and if you go over here on getting started, then you can see in the table of content here that there is a section on Linux command line, and if you click there, these are the things relevant to the command line, and the webinar I just showed you is here. So if you click here, this is the talk that oh, actually, I thought that was the talk, but no, this is a little page I created with the abstract and the talk and the video, because the webinar we are ending was recorded, so the video will be uploaded, and I will add a link here. And the presentation, if you click here, you get to the presentation. But yes, Alex, where is a good way to ask questions for those who are too shy to ask them now?
You can send an email to info@westgrid.ca, and we'll answer your question.
Okay, so info@westgrid.ca if you have any question. And in the subject, you could write command line tools, question for Murray or something, and Alex will forward that to me, and I will be very happy to answer you. We have another question here. How to install FZF so that I can use it on my Gram login mode? Oh, yeah, node. Yeah, very basic stuff. Well, I'm not sure what are good practices on maybe, Alex, you want to answer that? What are the best practices on how to install things on the cluster? Because I did do it on Cedar, but I'm not sure I'm always doing the best thing. So
there are two options, essentially. Either you can grab the source code and compile it and install it into your own home directory, if you know how to do that. And if you don't know how to do that, then simply send us an email or submit a problem ticket, and we'll install it for you, or we can even install it system-wide if it's an appropriate tool.
Right. So if you go back to the GitHub FZF page, there are install information. So for Mac users, you can indeed use brew install FZF. And you can simply clone the project and install it this way. That's what I did when I installed it on Cedar, and that worked. But again, I'm not totally sure this is the best practice. So Alex, jump in if you don't want everybody to start doing this. But it worked for me. And yes, otherwise you can also send an email to Westgrid or Compute Canada. Any other question? And yes, I did use it on Cedar to test things out after installing it with git clone, and it worked fine. So
yeah, same here. So on a cluster, I also installed in my user space, and all I did was git clone. So with FZF is just a script, so you don't have to actually compile it. So which is even better.
yeah, it's extremely easy. Yeah, yeah. I also installed Ranger, and Ranger, I think I had to compile it. I think it was a little bit less easy, but I don't remember because that was a while ago. But I could also install it on the cluster rather easily. But FZF was like really the simplest.
So yes, you can install it into your own home directory or pretty much any directory where you clone this, in this case, FZF, on the cluster, and then you have to modify your path so the path finds it.
Right, and for Ranger, you don't even have to install it if you want. You can simply run a Python script that's called ranger.py, or you can install it with make, and that's what I did, and it worked very easily. So yeah, actually, no, both were rather easy to install, and it's all in the GitHub projects. Those are great open source projects.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, thank you very much, Marie.
Alex,
yes? Oh, yes.
Very last question. So the person asking about Graham is also asking whether the home directory is where it should go.
Yes.
And that's what I did. But, okay.
Yes. You probably want to put it into your home directory, but if you want to put it somewhere else, like in your, well, probably not Scratch, but into your project directory, you certainly can, but home is the most appropriate place for it.
That's what I did.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. If you have questions later on, don't hesitate to send an email to info@westbridge.ca.
And then in 2 weeks, we're going to have another webinar. Marie will present Julia in high-performance computing, Julia programming language. All right. Thanks, everybody, and see you in 2 weeks.